Good morning, everyone. I'm here today to give you an update on the unexplained bird mortality event we had earlier this year, and more importantly, for a lot of folks, just to make sure that the information is out there about whether or not you can start feeding birds again, because we are getting into that point in time where it is important for our migrating birds to have access to food readily, as well as our wintering birds when scarcity in the landscape begins to happen. So, recap what kind of happened earlier this year. Well, basically, we had this unexplained mass mortality event in Kentucky, as well as many other states in the region, including Indiana, Maryland, Ohio, Virginia, West Virginia, I believe Pennsylvania as well. And what was happening was folks were finding several species of birds. A lot of times it was blue jays and starlings that had some crusty discharge around their eyes. There's swelling located there. Sometimes there was neurological issues presenting, and unfortunately, more often than not, there was also mortality. So they were finding dead birds. This, was noticed quite quickly by folks and reported to the state agencies. The agencies were collecting many of those animals, sending them off to labs and trying to determine what actually was causing this event. Unfortunately, all of those tests really didn't amount to much other than a lot of no's. No, it's not this. But what did happen while they were trying to figure all of this out was a ban on feeding birds in several counties in Kentucky and across much of the area where this issue was noticed. With that said, what has kind of happened is the birds are not being found at the rates they were found earlier this year. Pretty much is kind of slowed down to almost trickle to nothing, which is great news. And because of that, the Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources has given the okay to begin feeding birds again in those counties that had those restrictions. I think there were 6 by the time we were done. However, this is not all clear, everything's okay, and hunky dory, go back to normal and forget about the situation even happening. They want folks, if they are feeding birds, to be cautious and vigilant to make sure that there's no issues still existing, and if there are, they want folks to report those issues and also to terminate feeding again. So some of the guidelines that they've kind of issued to start feeding again, first and foremost, they want you to clean your feeders and bird baths weekly with a 10% bleach solution. Make sure that when you do this, you scrub all the parts that you can reach and access, rinse down with water, make sure you get all that bleach off there and allow them to air dry before putting them back up and filling them back up. Even with cleaning with bleach, if there's moisture left in there and you put bird seed in there, mold is potentially going to occur, which is another issue for birds that we don't want to have pop up. Secondly, like I said, they want you to remain vigilant. If you start noticing sick or dying birds at your feeders or bird baths, they want you to immediately take those feeders down for at least 2 weeks, clean them, bleach solution. And with those animals, they don't want you to handle them or do your best not to handle them. If you're going to handle them, use disposable gloves, right? So we have an ample supply of plastic gloves again. Make sure you do that. Get it into a inverted plastic bag. Grab the bird, then tie that bag shut to avoid contact with that bird. You can then either try to hold on to it, contact Fish and Wildlife directly and see if they would like that bird to run samples on, or you can throw it out in a trash container that is not in the house but outside to avoid bringing that bird into the house. And they do want you to report those birds using the same mechanism they had when the event was happening. It's a website found here that you can easily access access, I'm sorry, through the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Health and Disease webpage. So if you just Google KDFWR Wildlife Health and Disease, it'll bring you to that launch site. And within that website, you will find a link to report sick birds, among other wildlife disease issues. So that's kind of the update on that situation, but we're already talking about feeding birds and bird feeders. So a couple things that I want to let you know. In the last couple weeks, and we're kind of getting out of it now, but I just want to let you know that birds were just molting in preparation for their migratory flight, especially in August. And getting into early September. A few birds that I saw that were not looking so great, that were just really associated with molting, are common species we see in backyards like cardinals and blue jays. They may appear to be going bald or very thin. You can see skin, and that's just all part of the natural process of growing their new plumage in preparation for the winter. So no concerns there. Now, if you do want to start feeding birds again, remember that there's many different species that will use feeders, and certain species will actually only use certain types of feeders. Now, we're coming into fall and winter, so some of these species are really not going to be around much longer. So like our orioles are going to be gone. However, things like woodpeckers, many of our sparrow species, nuthatches, all of those animals will go to certain types of feed or certain types of feeders. So make sure that you have a variety of feeders if you're there for the enjoyment of feeding birds, so that you can reach as many types of birds as possible. What you feed them will also help in terms of, choosing things like black oil sunflowers is a great all-around catch-all. Many of our bird species that commonly come to feeders will gladly pick that up and use it. It also deters many of our pest feeding birds, things like starlings, house sparrows. They're not as keen on using sunflowers as their native counterparts. Other options include safflower for things like cardinals, and titmice, and this one really is a great option to keep starlings and house sparrows at bay. Now, your suet, which are those blocks that usually have seeds or nuts mixed in with them, could potentially have peanut butter or mealworms, are great for many of our nuthatches and many species, but woodpeckers especially will take advantage of them. Now, if you're feeding birds, you may want to know how to ID them, and there's some quick methods to help you ID birds, but to be honest, it's going to be practice and getting a book out, a field guide out, getting a phone app out, which we're going to talk about here in a second, and going through and trying to pick features on the bird you're seeing to help you ID and ID them down the road. Things that will help is if you pay attention to their size and shape, their colors, obviously, what do they look like? And we're going to talk here in a second about where you want to be noticing those colors. What are the features on the bird that you want to pay attention to? Their behavior, how are they walking? How are they navigating the tree, the trunk of the tree, the bark of the tree? Where are you seeing them? What kind of habitat are they in? And is there any other markings or features of the bird? Say, the beak is a really important feature to use to help you identify birds, because it tells you a lot about what they eat and potentially where they're found. Now, the field markings that we're talking about looking at are parts of the bird, basically, that you can use. So the features on the bird. So whether it's the crown, which is the top of the head, the eye ring is very important. The wings are incredibly important areas to focus on. Whether or not they have bars on them, what are the colors on the wings? Do they have colors on the underside of the wings? What is the tail shape? All of these play into identifying the species that you're seeing. And if you seem a little overwhelmed with all of it, it is overwhelming, but it does get a lot easier the more you practice. And there's a lot of resources out there to help you do this, and especially handy ones like phone apps, especially the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's Merlin app, completely free. It has songs on it. It has maps to tell you what potentially you're looking at, where it's found. So it's got a lot of resources built into it to help, beginners really have success, to all the way to experts who are trying to identify very difficult species to tell apart. There's also, if you get into identifying birds and bird watching, there's the eBird app, which allows you to build a list of birds and report it to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, which helps out, plays a major role in determining management decisions for a lot of our songbird species and migratory species. It's a great citizen science project to get involved in. Other useful websites and groups that are around that could aid you in identifying birds or growing your interest in birds include the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, who's kind of the catch-all and kind of the main place of finding information as it relates to birds, as well as local groups like the Central Kentucky Audubon Society and our Kentucky Ornithological Society are great folks to potentially reach out to and maybe go on a field trip with to help better your identifying of birds. With that, unfortunately, I'm not here today because I have a pediatric appointment for my daughter, but I'd be happy to take any questions via email and get to you the answers as soon as possible. And my email is simply mattspringer@uky.edu. Everyone have a great day.